I had the great good fortune to be interviewed by Katie Couric again on her Substack for Substack Live. And as always with Katie, it was a wide ranging conversation that focused on some of the most public scandals that the Trump regime is dealing with right now, but also dug deep on some things that aren't getting enough attention. Katie Couric is one of the best in the business, and she always brings humor and humanity to her interviews. She actually started this way: "What is your reaction to the whole damn thing?" And she was, of course, referring to the Epstein debacle. But as I said, we talked about many other things that are critically important to the American people, including worries about Donald's failing health, that shockingly, Caroline Levitt admitted to, although of course she downplayed it, and Donald's worsening cognitive decline and what that means in terms of leaving leadership vacuums at the very top of our government, leaving room for Nazis like Stephen Miller to be running the show. And yes, we did also talk about the Epstein debacle because that may be the thing that starts to turn all of this around.
Obviously, the big story of the week, although there are many other big stories we shouldn't ignore, but
Right.
is this Epstein stuff, right?
Yeah.
It appears your Uncle Donald, is is kind of having a baby over this. He is starting to criticize his supporters. He's angry that many parts of MAGA seem quite fixated on this. I would just love to hear your reaction to the whole damn thing.
Yeah, well, the whole damn thing is fascinating, quite frankly, for many reasons. But let's start with what I don't know if it's the most obvious one, but it's the most obvious one to me. Donald is somebody who has lived his entire life with complete impunity. Like he's been able to get away with everything. And he thinks it's because he's a genius, right? He thinks it's because he's so all powerful that he can manipulate people to do whatever he wants them to do. But the truth of the matter is, it's because he's been enabled his whole life by people like my grandfather and others. And now, most recently, of course, it's been the Republican Party and, of course, his followers. What he doesn't understand is that he can't turn off the switch. Now, I understand why he would think that because, again, he has gotten away with everything pretty much. But sometimes when you promise people something that means a lot to them, and in this case, I'm going to release the Epstein file because all of the people in it are just pedophiles and they're the worst among us. And it's going to implicate people at the highest levels of the Democratic Party. And people care about that, and they really, really believe you. And then on a dime, when you actually are in a position of power, when you actually do have the authority to release that information, and you are in charge, you have your handpicked people in key positions to make that happen. And then all of a sudden there's nothing to see or hear move along. It isn't going to fly. And it is kind of fascinating that is this issue. But I think he does not know how to process it at all because, unbelievably, for those of us who believe in accountability and who believe he's done horrible things for decades now, he cannot process the fact that he doesn't control this. It's fascinating.
And do you think that his lashing out at his supporters is just a sign of his inability to comprehend this pushback, and that's why he's kind of lashing out?
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's that. I think it's also it's insecurity, right? It's his understanding on some level, not consciously necessarily, but that he really has lost control of the narrative here. And we see this with in many other instances. Somebody pushes back against him, somebody stands up against him, and they're stupid. They don't know what they're talking about. They're liars. So the difference here, of course, as you say, is that it's his people now. And I think that, again, it's on the one hand, a sign of how badly he's flailing and how desperate he is. But it's also his way of trying to reassert control. Like, I think he believes that if he singles people out or singles out this group of people who is going against him and says they're stupid and he rejects them, that other followers of his are going to say, oh, wait, we can't cross Donald. That would be wrong. And I don't think that's going to work this time either.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. Do you think that they will be sort of criticized into submission? Fox News and I think Charlie Kirk and other right wing media, I think Megyn Kelly, they have sort of step back and she was blaming Joe Biden for this. Charlie Kirk was saying, I'm going to get on the train and not talk about this anymore. Fox News seems to have moved on from this. So there are those who are afraid to cross him. Do you think that his supporters and Heather Cox Richardson wrote an interesting piece, uh, uh, and she was talking about how he really made his way through conspiracy theories. If you think about it, with the birther
Mhm.
thing with Barack Obama, and then of course saying that the election was rigged. I mean, this has been his bread and butter. So when he suddenly says, "We're not," there's no there. I think it does leave people wondering, well, what the hell is going on? You have been the purveyor of these conspiracy theories so often before. Why are you suddenly hands off? And I guess the question is, why do you think that uh, that they're not putting this list out or not making the file public? I guess there are all sorts of theories, that you're hearing floating around.
Yeah, I'll start with the second question first, just because it's easier because I don't know. I think that it is very difficult for me to believe that if the information in this file had nothing to do with people close to Donald, or conversely, or at the same time, didn't implicate top Democrats, then why not release it? So either it does implicate people Donald doesn't want implicated publicly, or it doesn't implicate the people he's been promising us for a decade would be implicated, his enemies in the Democratic Party. Either way, he looks like a liar or he looks like he doesn't know what he's talking about. So what's so alarming to me is that there are so many other people on board, like the Attorney General of the United States, the Director of the FBI. They are all fine.
And they both have contradicted those things. She said it was on her desk waiting for
Right.
her to review it.
Yep.
Kash Patel has talked about a black book that the FBI had in its possession. So it's strange.
It's very, very strange. And again, it the thing that's most concerning is that it actually does implicate people in among the most horrific crimes imaginable, and all of these people are willing just to cover it up because it's going to make their boss look bad. That's horrifying to me, and it makes us question even further what is going on with the rule of law in this country. But as to the sort of high profile influencer people who are getting reined in, because Donald's picking up the phone and begging Charlie Kirk to keep his mouth shut. I don't actually think people are going to be reined in like your average person, your average MAGA person, your average QAnon conspiracist is going to listen to them either. They're just going to start thinking, as many people have expressed, that they're part of the deep state cover up too. And what I'm most interested in, because I think this is something that could actually have an impact on how this plays out, is what elected Republicans in Congress decide to do here, because they are between a rock and a hard place.
Well, they're starting to drift away. I don't know if you can say stand up to Donald Trump, but they're starting to make noises about that, right? Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert and Mike Johnson, kind of saying they don't agree. Now, what will they actually do about that remains to be seen, right, Mary?
Yeah, always, always. Words are cheap, and their words are worth nothing. But Mike Johnson has proven to be one of the most sycophanty of the sycophants, and for him to try to walk a fine line, I found that very interesting because it suggests to me that there are Republicans in his caucus who are letting him know that this isn't going away, and they have constituents that are not going to let them slide here. They have constituents who want to know the answers, and if the Republicans keep denying it, because remember, I don't know if it's been 2 times now or 3 times now, but Democrats have brought a bill or resolution up in the House, say, hey, let's see what's in it. Show us, we deserve to know. Republicans have voted against all transparency there. That's not sustainable for them, I don't think.
Yeah, I think I always think about the tipping point when their political highs are actually in jeopardy, not from Trump, but from their constituents.
Yeah.
If that, in fact, will make them change their tune. But I wanted to ask you about why his supporters, they know that he's had a long time relationship with Epstein. So, how are they able to kind of compartmentalize and say, we want to know what happened? We want to know this client list. We want to know who partook in this disgusting activity. But, oh, yeah, he was a buddy of Epstein. He's been photographed several times. And, you know, they're okay with that.
Yeah, I think the way I look at that issue in particular is that they have been so primed to believe Donald, despite all evidence to the contrary, despite his being one of the most prolific serial liars in history, that I think they can compartmentalize. You know, it's not guilt by association. That's Donald. You know, and he's also very good at softening the ground and getting people to accept worse and worse and worse things. So I think that for reasons we will probably be sifting through for the rest of our lives, like how is it that he of all people is able to keep people loyal to him when to those of us who aren't sucked in by it, know with absolute clarity that he lies, that he is most likely implicated in these horrible things. And I think in a more general sense, and I try to remind myself about this all the time because it's extremely difficult not to be angry about people who keep voting people like Donald into office, people who continue to accept the most unacceptable things. For decades now, they have been lied to on a daily basis by people they trust, by news sources they trust, by their elected officials in whom they have put their trust by voting them into office. They have been lied to constantly. I'm sure there are millions of people in this country who don't even know Donald was convicted on 34 felony counts. They probably know nothing about the documents case in Florida, and they believe what they've been told about January 6th. And I actually been thinking about that a lot because the second time you and I met was on January 6th, 2021. And we look at where we are now and how much of the unacceptable has become acceptable to even more people. And yet, this one issue, which I'm not saying it isn't serious. What Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell did was absolutely unspeakable. And if other people are implicated, then they need to be tried, convicted, and imprisoned forever. But Donald Trump incited and committed an insurrection against his own government. So it is fascinating. Why this? Why now? And why? Another question: why aren't they prepared? Because clearly they're not.
And do you think how damaging do you think it will be to his support? I mean, in terms of his supporters, do you think that many of them are going to get disgusted and fall away from the whole MAGA movement, or do you think he'll somehow be able to get them back into his web?
Yeah, well, Katie, as you and I know, to our chagrin, most likely, um, it's impossible to know because you think that some deal breaker occurred and it ends up not being a deal breaker. I would have thought the big lie was, I would have thought the handling of COVID was, January 6th was, and it never seems to happen. So I'm not willing to speculate about that because I don't know, but this does seem to be the thing that may, for many people, just be a bridge too far. But I think a couple of things concern me. First of all, and you might have asked me this question a long time ago. Can MAGA survive Donald, or is MAGA over if Donald gets back into office? And I think we know the question. MAGA can survive beyond Donald. I think that seems pretty clear. But more to the point, in the short term, is, let's say people start abandoning him. Will it matter? I mean, it's not like he's going to resign. It doesn't change the fact that he's president of the United States of America and that the same people are running the agencies that are being destroyed in real time. So I think it depends on how that sets up the next person in the Republican
Right.
Party.
I was going to say it may not damage him, but it could damage JD Vance, for example, in the future.
Unless JD Vance sees the writing on the wall and is willing to split with Donald Trump. And that's where it gets interesting.
Yeah, that seems unlikely, but who knows?
Yes, it does.
The news just gets more and more depressing, doesn't it? I wanted to ask you about Caroline Leavitt, Mary, because it was interesting. She announced today that President Trump has been diagnosed with a, quote, benign and common vein condition, VEIN, not VAIN, everyone, known as chronic venous or venous, I guess it's
I believe it's venous.
yeah, venous insufficiency after he noticed swelling in his legs. I found that surprising that the White House, a White House that for a very long time, wasn't particularly transparent about the president's health and had that kind of quack doctor, I guess I should be careful, but that guy on Park Avenue saying, he's in incredible shape and all that jazz. Were you surprised that she told the press corps that?
I think even Caroline Leavitt, who is one of the most practiced liars on the planet, which is impressive. She's 27. I mean, credit where credit is due. I don't think that woman has ever told the truth to the American people since she started in that job. So because she is and she's so contemptuous of anybody who would dare ask a direct question. I am a little surprised, but it also, because we have every reason to be cynical, it leads me to believe that there's more to it, that it is more serious. And there's documentary evidence of a bruising on his hand going way back. So my guess, and again, I'm not a doctor, I'm just speculating here.
Chronic venous. I was just going to read a little bit about it, insufficiency, but keep going, Mary.
Well, because it has, like many other illnesses, it has different levels. It can exist along a continuum. There can be mild cases and there can be severe cases. And from my limited understanding so far, a severe case, like swelling of the ankles, occurs when it's getting bad. And we know he has had that pat on his hand from time again for going back months, if not years. So basically, Caroline Leavitt gives us no reason to believe her about anything. And that is also a dangerous place to be, because we should be able to trust information given to us about the sitting president of the United States of America. And we never are. So you're right. Why would she be telling the truth now? Well, my guess is she's telling it a partial truth because it was becoming unavoidable. Like, it had to be addressed somehow. And saying that he has bruised hands all the time because he shakes other people's hands too much, nobody's buying that nonsense. And it just makes them look even worse.
By the way, I just Googled it, and chronic venous insufficiency, or CVI, is a condition where blood doesn't efficiently return from the legs to the heart, often due to damaged valves in the veins. This can lead to a range of symptoms, including swelling, pain, and skin changes, and in severe cases, ulcers. While not usually life-threatening, CVI can significantly impact quality of life, and if left untreated, may lead to complications like deep vein thrombosis or pulmonary embolism. Um, anyway, I thought we'd tell people that. I wondered if it had anything to do with with your mental faculties,
Yeah.
but it doesn't seem like it does. But um, I wanted to end by asking you about Heather Cox Richardson's newsletter last night. My sister told me about it this morning, then I read it. Um, and she basically was writing how President Trump has seemed to be losing some of the dominance that for so long bolstered his standing with his base. And here she gave some examples, and I'm going to read them and just get your reaction.
Mhm.
On Saturday at the FIFA Club World Cup trophy ceremony, he seemed to miss the signal that he should leave the stage as the winning team celebrated and had to be maneuvered behind the players. I thought it was interesting that one player was like, "What the hell is he doing?" Do you remember? Who
Yes,
was
I do.
trying to- On Tuesday, he fell asleep on stage at the Pennsylvania Energy and Innovation Summit. At the same event, Trump told what CNN fact checker Daniel Dale called an especially odd imaginary tale, claiming that his uncle, an MIT professor an MIT professor, had taught Ted Kaczynski, better known as the Unabomber. Trump recounted a conversation with his uncle about Kaczynski, but in fact, Kaczynski didn't go to MIT, and Trump's uncle John died more than a decade before Kaczynski became famous, so Trump and his uncle could not have identified him as the Unabomber. And finally, on Wednesday, Trump called Jerome Powell a terrible Fed chair and added, "I was surprised he was appointed." But of course, he was appointed by none other than Donald J. Trump. So, do you feel like, I mean, in a world where people felt they didn't pay enough attention to Joe Biden, and sort of him maybe perhaps missing a step or losing some of his function, cognitive function. Do you think these are indications that maybe he's, I don't know, having some trouble?
Oh yeah, I mean, I again, I'm not a neurologist, I'm not a neuropsychologist or anything like that, but fairly observant person who knows him well. I think that Donald has been in cognitive decline for quite some time. The problem is he has so many people propping him up, and he also is starting from a place where, for reasons again, we're going to be spending many decades trying to get to the bottom of. Tens of millions of people are willing to go along and believe anything he says and let him do whatever he wants. So these latest signs show to me that this is just a continuation of the slide. And what is even odder is that he often does not seem to be oriented to time and place, as you mentioned, like at the World Cup, football thing. He didn't. He had no ability to pick up on social cues, and I think again part of that is because in his head he is the most important person in the universe, but many other people make him feel that way. So, okay, maybe we can let that go, but still you would think that he would pick up on how many people did not want him there. But probably, he's been falling asleep publicly for a long time. I think the reason it's taken so long for people to see what's happening is because I was at I had the great misfortune at being at the Atlanta debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Biden, it was a terrible performance. It was alarming. He mumbled. He was incoherent, et cetera, et cetera. He seemed old. He seemed not to, as you said, to have missed a step or several. Donald, if you actually listen to the things Donald said, was absolutely unhinged. He's talking about people eating people's cats and dogs, but he did it with energy. You know what I mean? So I think that covers up a lot because people think old, losing it, they associate that with being low energy, which is
Or
why he called.
or tentative, but you're right. He says things with such conviction and
Right.
authority.
And I think another so now he's also experiencing some of the things we saw in Joe Biden. He is slowing down. He is having trouble staying awake. He can't remember things. But to me, the thing about my great uncle John is the most telling. Everything Donald said about Uncle John was a lie. And why? Why? Do we care if he was or was not the longest serving professor at MIT? He wasn't a physicist. He does not have. He was an electrical engineer. And why? Like, what is going on in his thought process that he thinks it's a useful fact or it's helpful to him that his uncle taught the Unabomber, especially if it isn't true. So it's that kind of confabulation and fabrication that I think is the clearest example that all is not well.
I wondered if sometimes when I read his posts on Truth Social, uh, I wonder if he's being uh, prompted in any way, or somebody is saying, you should do this, you should do that. I mean, they clearly sound like him in the all caps and the sort of hyperbolic nature of these posts. But do you think that he is working with anyone like a Stephen Miller who says, hey, you should do this? Or do you think he's doing it totally on his own?
I mean, I think as far as the posts go, because again, credit where credit is due, Donald in the past has been very good at manipulating people on social media and leveraging social media in very effective, if diabolical ways, right?
It's so interesting, by the way, Mary, because I went to see him before the 2016 election to try to get an interview with him. And, I was working for Yahoo News. He didn't even understand the internet at all. Now, people can make fun of me because in 1994, I didn't either, but this was 2016. He didn't even use email.
Right.
It was so interesting. So he really didn't have any understanding about the changing media landscape at all back then. But he has learned very quickly. But I still don't know how much he understands. It's more that he sees it as a vehicle for his message, right?
Yeah, I don't think he understands it at all. What he understands, though, is how to communicate effectively with a very specific kind of person, like a person who is responsive to him. That's why, like, Twitter was the perfect social media platform. Not that he understands how it works or even why it works, but for whatever reason, it's incredibly effective. Those short, terse, energetic messages using mockery, using contempt, pretending to be a strong guy, being a bully. So I do think that one, he's sort of harkening back to that time when he did have all sorts of control and the ability to manipulate people on Twitter, where he had many more followers than he does on his failing social media platform. But I think it's also a way for him to feel like he's in control when so many things are spiraling out of control for him. So I think what is more worrisome is that it's what's happening when he's not on social media. I think Stephen Miller is totally in charge of what's going on with the immigration horrors in this country, for example. I don't think Donald's telling anybody what to do. I think it's the other way around, and he's just letting it go on.
Which is a very scary thought.
Yeah.
If you know much about Stephen Miller. Well, Mary, I'm going to let you take a break because Mary has COVID, everybody. So she hasn't been feeling well. She's under the weather. Feel better. It's really great to see you again, Mary. I
Yeah.
miss talking to you.
Same.
And have a great weekend. And Mary, let's do this again soon.
Absolutely. Bye,
Okay.
Katie. Bye,
Bye, everyone.
everybody.
Bye.